A few weeks ago, I was playing around with some new displays for my craft booth, and I made this little earring display. And I decided I wanted to make a couple more of them. And in the meantime, I asked you in the community tab if you were interested in how I made this, and it seemed like there was some interest in this project. So thank you for those of you who commented and encouraged me to make this video. And what I like about this display is that you can use it for just a single pair of earrings if you've got kind of a bigger pair, like these. But you can also display two pairs of earrings if you have sort of smaller pairs. You can put one on each side. So I'm planning to make a couple more, as I mentioned, for my craft booth. I'm planning to go to the Recycle Santa Fe Art Festival again. Also, be sure to stick around because I have a couple of other upcycled ideas for jewelry displays if you have a craft booth and you're interested in making some of your own displays. This project starts, like a lot of my other projects, with aluminum cans, and you're going to need 2 cans for each display. And you just need this bottom portion of the can. So I've already gone ahead and cut up 2 of my cans. You can see that the cuts aren't even that smooth. It really doesn't matter as long as you're careful and don't, poke yourself. You don't need to have a terribly smooth edge on your can. So you just need 2 pieces of can. You also need some metal tape, and you can find this in the sort of ductwork area of your hardware stores. You need a couple of popsicle sticks for each display, a little bit of E6000 glue. You're also going to need some joint compound or some kind of sort of putty that will harden and that's got a little bit of weight to it. And then I just have a little spatula to spread the joint compound with. You also need some spray paint, and I've decided to change up this design. I originally painted this one copper, but I'm switching to a black color, and I'm going to add a little bit of twine around the bottom of this right here where there's kind of a gap, just to finish it off. Because if you've seen my other videos of my booth display, you know that I have sort of a black and natural kind of color combination for my tables and my displays. So I'm going to go with that on these displays that I'm making today as well. You're also just going to need a pair of scissors. I've got a little paper towel and some wet wipes to do a little cleanup. And the final thing that you need is a hot glue gun. And I'm going to be using my cordless Sure Bonder hot glue gun for this. I have a smaller glue gun, but I need quite a bit of glue for this project, so if you have a bigger glue gun, that will work better for this project. So the first thing I want to do is fill my can bottoms with the joint compound. And this can be a little bit messy, and you don't have to worry about making it look too nice. The reason that I'm adding this is just to put a little bit of weight into the aluminum piece so that the base of the earring stand will have a little bit more weight to it. And this is very easy to clean up with a little bit of water once it dries. So if you get any on the outside edge, it doesn't matter. You can clean it up really easily. And the other thing is that you don't have to get it super smooth to the edge. You just want to make sure that your joint compound is kind of level so that when you put the pieces together, they're going to sit straight and not be kind of wobbly. So if you cut the can evenly, you can just fill it to the edge. Mine are kind of sloppily cut, and so I'm just going to try to make sure that I have a smooth kind of level amount of joint compound in each of my aluminum can bottoms. So they don't have to be perfectly filled. As I mentioned, I'm just trying to add some weight here So I'm going to go ahead and just take a paper towel and kind of clean up the edges, and then I will let that dry overnight. In this next step, I'm just going to glue my two popsicle sticks together with some E6000 glue. And I've gone ahead and just marked the center of one of my popsicle sticks. So all I need to do is add a little bit of E6000 glue. And stick the two popsicle sticks together. I just want to make sure that I'm keeping a 90-degree angle with my popsicle stick and that I'm centering my popsicle stick over my center mark there. And then I'll go ahead and let this set up for a few hours. It does take 24 hours to fully cure, but you can work with it after a couple of hours if you're careful. I'm ready to assemble the pieces of the earring holder now, and what I want to do is put these two pieces together. Now, if you've cut your edges very evenly, this will probably fit slightly nicer than mine, but I'm going to cover all this up, so I'm not really overly concerned about it. What I do want to be sure is that I get the pieces level. And if you have a part in the middle where your filler is sticking up, you can sand it down or clean it up a little bit that way, but you don't have to worry if you have some gaps between the metal pieces. What I'm going to do is kind of line it up as cleanly as I can so that the pieces seem fairly level. And then you can see that there's sort of a low spot here. So I'm just going to add a little extra hot glue to that spot and then attach my pieces together. And again, you don't have to have it totally filled in perfectly. You just want to sort of hold the pieces together in a sort of level fashion. And don't worry again about the gaps. You just want it to sit straight and as level as possible. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you don't want it to be totally kittywampus. And I'm going to let that set up a little bit, and then you can see I have some extra little bit of my joint compound that needs to be cleaned up, so I'm going to wipe that off as soon as this sets up a little bit. If you don't have joint compound, you could probably use air dry clay. You could maybe even use hot glue. I don't know how heavy it would end up being, but this just has a nice solid feel to the base with this joint compound in it. So my next step is to cover up my gap between the metal pieces, and I'm going to use my metal tape for that. You probably could use any kind of tape. We are going to spray paint this, so you're going to want to use something that will take the paint, but you don't have to have metal tape necessarily. I like this metal tape because it's really easy to work with. It has a paper backing on it, so it's easy to mark and cut to the length and width that you need. So it's just kind of my go-to tape when I'm working with the aluminum, but again, if you don't have metal tape, you can use something else. You just want to cut it to the width that will cover the gap between your metal pieces. And so I'm just going to peel back my paper a little bit at a time and wrap this right around my shape here. Just make sure I've got it pressed nice and solidly so that I've got a nice weighted piece of metal now. So I'm ready to add the popsicle sticks, and I want to just fill this little indentation with some hot glue, and then I'm going to set this in here and hold it plumb until the glue sets up a little bit and will hold the stick itself. So you do want to make sure that your popsicle sticks aren't leaning one way or the other. So you may have to hold this for a minute or two to let it set up. So you can see this is standing fairly even and plumb, and the glue is still a little bit warm, so I'm going to let that cool off, and then I will add a coat of my black spray paint. Here's what the piece looks like after I painted it. So now I want to carefully put some E6000 glue right around this gap between the glue and the aluminum, and then I'll add a little piece of cording. So I like to use a little skewer when I'm trying to do a little more precise work with the E6000 glue. And that way I can not get too much glue around the edge where I don't want it. So once I have the glue laid in, I can go ahead and use my skewer, and I have these little silicone fingertips that I bought to use with my hot glue, but it works really well with this E6000 too, because I don't really want to touch my fingers in this E6000 glue either. So I can carefully kind of just press the twine into the glue until I make it all the way around. And just for fun, I decided to add a little swirly piece of twine to the top of my display. For this next project, my idea is to make sort of a vertical bracelet display, and I'm starting with an empty paper towel tube. I have 2 pieces of corrugated cardboard that are cut into 6-inch squares, and again I'm going to be using 2 pieces of the bottoms of the aluminum cans. I'm also going to be using the joint compound again, a little bit of twine, my E6000 glue, a little bit of Elmer's white glue, some scissors, and for this project I'm going to need my tin snips. So I have this nice small pair of scissor type tin snips. Again, I'm going to be using my cordless glue gun. And the last thing I have is this. It's actually a balloon stick, but if you don't have something like this, you can probably use anything that has sort of a suction cup shape on it if you can attach some kind of stick to it. Basically, I just want it to kind of fit inside of the tube. I'm going to make a little decorative top out of my aluminum cans, and I want it to sit on top of the tube. So once I start putting it together, you may come up with some of your own ideas of how you can make a top piece, but also it's kind of optional. You don't necessarily have to put this top piece on there. So the first step is to trim down my aluminum can bottoms a little bit further. So I want to cut right on this indentation part, so I'm only left with this domed piece for this project. So for that I need my tin snips. And I'm just going to kind of cut some slits just so it's a little easier to work with. And then I'm just going to kind of rest my scissors inside this indentation here and cut as carefully as I can all the way around. You're not going to get this edge completely smooth, but you do want to try to kind of get it, a lot of the little burrs and edges trimmed off so that you have a fairly nice little domed piece when you're done. And these tiny pieces do go flying, so be careful. So I'm just going to repeat that process on my second can bottom here. So when you're done, you should have two domed pieces that you can kind of sandwich together like this. And they don't have to fit together perfectly. You just want them to make kind of a saucer shape when you're done. This next step is optional, but again, I'm going to go ahead and add a little joint compound to the concave part of this dome because I, again, want to add a little bit of weight. I just think it will make it feel a little nicer and a little heavier duty. But you don't have to do it. So again, you just want to make the joint compound as kind of even on the top as possible. And I'll go ahead and clean up the edges and let this dry. The cardboard pieces are going to make up the base of my display, and you could use one piece if you wanted to. I just thought it would be a little nicer with a little heavier piece. So I'm going to use some hot glue to glue my two pieces together. And next I'm going to take the paper towel tube, and it's a little bit longer than I want it to be, so I've marked a length that I want to use. So I'm just going to try to cut it as straight as I can on my mark here. And it's also a little bit bigger around than I want it to be. So I'm just going to cut a slit all the way up the tube and coil it a little tighter and use my hot glue to glue it back together. So again, this step is optional, but I want to have a little bit more surface area to glue to my base, and also just to add a little weight to the piece itself. So I'm going to fill the bottom of the tube in with a little bit more of my joint compound, and probably the easiest way to do it is just to use a knife or your finger. We'll try a knife here. And again, this is just to add some weight to the tube and also to have sort of a more surface area to attach the tube to your base. You don't want to fill it all the way full though if you're going to put a top piece on, because you need the space inside the tube, but you can fill it about halfway or however much weight you want to put in there. And then because I want this to be flat on the bottom, I want to set it standing up. So you can use a piece of plastic or something. I've got a piece of parchment paper here, and I'm just going to make sure that the joint compound dries in a flat kind of level way so that I have a nice smooth surface to glue. I'm ready to attach the two pieces of my top now, and I'm going to do this the same way as I did for my earring holder. I'm just going to use a little bit of hot glue, try to get the piece as even as possible and not worry about any of the gaps between the metal. And then I'll clean up my edges to get rid of some of that excess filler that's on the outside edge. I have a piece of metal tape that I've cut just wide enough to cover my gap and hold the two pieces a little more securely. So I'm just going to go ahead and wrap that around my edge again. And this should cover up any burrs or raw edges that you have left on the metal. The other thing I like about this tape is you can kind of burnish it with your thumbnail or a burnishing tool if you have one, just to make sure that you've got it nice and molded to your shape. So I'm ready to add my little plastic cap, and I'm using E6000 glue for this step because I want this to be a nice strong bond, and this is the only spot that the glue is going to hold this piece. And I just trust the E6000 glue quite a bit more than the hot glue. So I just want to make sure that I have this kind of centered on my little saucer. And then I'm going to let that glue set up. The next thing I want to do is attach my little post here to my base, but I want to make sure I'm getting it in the center, so I'm going to mark my center here. I just drawn an X from corner to corner. And for this, I'm going to use a little bit of E6000 glue and a little bit of hot glue because I want there to be a nice firm grip with the E6000 glue, but I also want it to grab quickly, and so that's why I use the hot glue. And I'm just going to center it as well as I can on my X here and press it into place. So I'm going to let this glue set up for a little bit, and then I'll add a coat of my black spray paint. And I decided to make my cap piece a little more decorative by adding a rolled aluminum can bead and another little pearl bead on top. And this piece is also ready for some black spray paint. To finish off my vertical bracelet holder, I'm going to use a combination of Elmer's glue and hot glue to wrap the base with my twine and to wrap this tube portion with the twine. And I just need to trim off my balloon holder so that this will fit inside of my tube here. And I may add a little cording underneath here because I don't exactly like the way that this looks underneath. So I'm just going to spend a little time finishing off these pieces with the cording. I decided to make this project because I had some acrylic mirror tiles left over from a project that I made a few weeks ago. And these acrylic mirrors aren't really perfect mirrors, if they're not as good as glass mirrors, but they are really pretty good mirrors. This has a protective film on it right now, so you can't really see how reflective it is. But I decided to make some sort of reflective little display trays to display some of my jewelry pieces. So I'm going to be using a mirror tile, 2 pieces of cardboard that are cut to 6 inches square, 4 bottle caps. Again, I'm going to be adding some twine, so you need some scissors, my hot glue gun, and the black spray paint. So for this project, I'm going to again just glue my 2 pieces of cardboard together with my hot glue gun. Just want to make sure I get my edges lined up. And these mirror tiles have an adhesive back, so they're very easy to craft with. And I want to just lay my mirror tile onto my cardboard. And if you want to, you can measure. Sometimes the cardboard isn't exactly perfect, so I'm just going to kind of eyeball this. But I want to go ahead and trace around the edge so that once I peel the back off, I can get it in the same place. So now I can just carefully peel off the back here. And I'm just going to fold back part of it so I can sort of not have the whole thing loose. And I'm going to line up my tile here and just press it onto my cardboard. Oops. And I can kind of peel back the back of my mirror here as I go. And you can break these mirrors, but they're much less breakable than a glass mirror. They're much more flexible, so again, that's what makes them very suitable for craft projects. So I'm just going to make sure I got that pressed on there nice and tight. And then I'm going to flip this over. And I'm going to take my bottle caps and just fill them with hot glue to make little feet. Now if you want to, you can carefully measure where your feet go. Again, I'm sort of lazy and I'm just going to eyeball it. So I'm going to let the glue cool down, and then I'm going to add a coat of my black spray paint. So my paints had a chance to dry, and I should just mention that I did not end up using the black spray paint. I started to spray my projects with the black, and I ran out of paint, so I just was trying to find something that I had on hand, and I ended up using this rubbed bronze instead. And I don't know if you can see on screen, but it actually is a much prettier finish than the flat black color. So I'm going to finish this piece in a similar fashion to my bracelet holder by just wrapping the edge with some twine. But I thought I would also add a little bit of a crisscross design just to kind of shape the edge of my mirror here. If you enjoyed this content, please be sure to hit the subscribe button. You can find more craft booth tips and display ideas in the video linked below, and check the description box for a place to sign up to receive the Upcycled Design Lab newsletter. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.